Now I'll give you some exercises, 4 problems. Copy these down, stop the tape, work the problems, then turn the tape back on and check your answers. First exercise is subtract 12 subtract 31. Second, -3 subtract 8. Third exercise, -4 subtract -7. Fourth exercise, -16 subtract 5 subtract -13. Copy the problems, stop the tape, work the problems, then turn the tape back on and check your answers. The answers you should have are -19, -11, 3, and -8. If you made a mistake or had trouble doing any of these problems, mark on your paper where you had trouble, then check with a lab instructor or a tutor when you go to the lab. Now let's practice a bit more with fractions and decimals. Just as a reminder, recall that to add or to subtract fractions, rewrite them as equivalent fractions with a common denominator. Then add or subtract the numerators and keep the common denominator. To add or subtract fractions, rewrite them as equivalent fractions with a common denominator. Then add or subtract the numerators and keep the common denominator. Our first example is -4/5 subtract 1/3. We're subtracting fractions. That means we must change subtract to add and take the opposite of the second number. So -4/5 subtract 1/3 becomes -4/5 add the opposite of 1/3. -4/5 add -1/3. Then we find a common denominator. Common denominator for 5 and 3 is 15. And so we change each of these to 15ths. -4/5 converts to -12/15. Remember that common denominator 15 means we figure out what 5 into 15 is. 5 into 15 is 3. And then 3 times the -4 gives us -12. So the -12/15 is equivalent to -4/15. -1/3 converts to -5/15 similarly. 3 into 15 is 5. 5 times -1 is -5. Now we're adding. We add -12 and -5 to get -17. -17/15 is the correct answer. For those who prefer mixed number form, we can write this as -1 and 2/15 if you prefer. Next example, -2 and 1/6 subtract -5 and 1/10. -2 and 1/6 subtract -5 and 1/10. We begin by converting each of these mixed numbers into improper fraction form. 6 times 2 is 12, plus 1 is 13, and so we get -13/6. Subtract. 10 times 5 is 50, plus 1 is 51, and so we get -51/10. So we have 13/6 subtract -51/10. The common denominator for these is 60, or, even better, 30. If we use 30 for our common denominator, this converts to 30ths, and I notice that what I've done here, and I didn't look at it closely enough, what I've done first is to subtract this negative number to add its opposite, and then get the common denominator. So our common denominator of 30, we have negative 13/6 that converts to negative 65/30. We have 51/10 that converts to 153/30. Then adding these two numbers, we're adding numbers with opposite signs, so we take the difference between these and use the sign of the greater. And so we get positive 88/30. Positive 88/30 reduces to 44/15. And 44/15, the improper fraction form, is the preferred form for our answer. Let's go back through this once more. We have negative 2 1/6 that converts to negative 13/6. We have negative 5 1/10 that converts to negative 51/10. To subtract a number, we add its opposite. The common denominator for 6 and 10 is 30. Each fraction must be reconverted into 30ths. Then we perform the addition by adding the numerators. Keep the denominator unchanged, and then, if possible, reduce the final answer. And so we get 44/15. If you prefer to have the mixed number form, you can convert this to 2 and 14/15. With decimals, let's recall that to add or subtract decimals, we write the numbers so that the decimals are in a vertical line. Then we add or subtract as with integers. To add or subtract decimals, write the numbers so that the decimals are in a vertical line. Then add or subtract as with integers. So let's look at some examples. Our first example is 5 1/10 subtract negative 1 6/100. We begin by changing subtract to add the opposite. And so we get 5 1/10 add 1 6/100. Then the scratch work for adding these is here to the side. 5 1/10, 1 6/100. We affix an extra 0 to the right of the 5 1/10 so that the number of decimal places matches to make it easier to line up the numbers. Make sure the decimals are in a vertical line, and then add. And so our answer is 6 16/100. Next, negative 36 5/10, subtract 2 63/100. Let's first convert from subtract the number to add its opposite. This gives us 36 5/10, add negative 2 63/100. We do our scratch work here by writing negative 36 5/10, negative 2 63/100. Once again, an extra 0 is affixed to make the decimals and the integers line up properly. And adding these, we get negative 39 and 13/100. Negative 39 and 13/100.